trodden.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you hear checklist and manifesto, you think, oh, gee, that's like getting a bit overexcited about the humble checklist. But Mark, it really is so much more. I think Atul has a big story to tell here, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does. So, Mike, why don't we let Atul himself introduce us to the concept of checklists, because they really can help us all get that little bit better. So let's now hear from Atul Gawande break down the value of checklists.
I got interested in this when the World Health Organization came to my team asking if we could help with a project to reduce deaths in surgery. The volume of surgery had spread around the world, but the safety of surgery had not. Now, our usual tactics for tackling problems like these are to do more training, give people more specialization, or bring in more technology. Well, in surgery, you couldn't have people who are more specialized, and you couldn't have people who are better trained. And yet we see unconscionable levels of death, disability that could be avoided. And so we looked at what other high-risk industries do. We looked at skyscraper construction. We looked at the aviation world. And we found that they have technology, they have training, and then they have one other thing. They have checklists. I did not expect to be spending a significant part of my time as a Harvard surgeon worrying about checklists. And yet what we found were that these were tools to help make experts better. We got the lead safety engineer for Boeing to help us. Could we design a checklist for surgery, not for the lowest people on the totem pole, but for the folks who were all the way around the chain, the entire team, including the surgeons? And what they taught us was that designing a checklist to help people handle complexity actually involves more difficulty than I had understood. You have to think about things like pause points. You need to identify the moments in a process when you can actually catch a problem before it's a danger and do something about it. You have to identify that this is a before takeoff checklist. And then you need to focus on the killer items. An aviation checklist like this one for a single-engine plane isn't a recipe for how to fly a plane. It's a reminder of the key things that get forgotten or missed if they're not checked. So we did this. We created a 19-item, 2-minute checklist for surgical teams. We had the pause points immediately before anesthesia is given, immediately before the knife hits the skin, immediately before the patient leaves the room. And we had a mix of dumb stuff on there, making sure an antibiotic is given in the right time frame because that cuts the infection rate by half. And then interesting stuff because you can't make a recipe for something as complicated as surgery. Instead, you can make a recipe for how to have a team that's prepared for the unexpected. And we had items like making sure everyone in the room had introduced themselves by name at the start of the day, because you have half a dozen people or more who are sometimes coming together as a team for the very first time that day that you're coming in. We implemented this checklist in 8 hospitals around the world, deliberately in places from rural Tanzania to the University of Washington in Seattle. We found that after they adopted it, the complication rates fell 35%. It fell in every hospital it went into. The death rates fell 47%.
47% reduction in fatalities, Mark. I mean, I think he just made the best case possible for the checklist, don't you?
Well, exactly. I mean, not only are you hearing from Atul around the value of doing it pre-takeoff, which I think is a great little term, about what might get missed. He then goes on to say, well, the proof is in the pudding. The death rates were cut by nearly 50%. 47% is an enormous percentage. So I think he's made the case for the value of checklists right there. And we've only just heard one clip, Mike.
And just think about it. Like, I think if I reflect on my own behavior, like, I know that if I have a big event, a big deliverable, I'm probably inclined to go write up a checklist. Thanks to the show, what's been interesting for me is I've discovered, listening to Atul there and listening to other experts, is I don't think I use it nearly enough. Like, I almost dismiss the need for a checklist for more menial things, for more daily things. But what's really interesting is Atul's like, hey, the checklist, it ain't some silly trite little thing. Actually, it's the core of a language and a practice between not only one or two experts, but an entire team. It can such a simple thing can become like the unifying force, right? It's like the constitution by which a team are going to work together, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And as we hear from Atul during the rest of the show, he is going to highlight this collaboration and teamwork piece. And to build on what you were just saying, Mike, the way that I use to-do lists is definitely quite functional. But actually what I am already learning from Atul is to insert checklists around the process I go on in order to complete some of those items on the checklist. So what I mean by that is, instead of saying, right, today I need to do the pre-production of our show. That's one big item. But the truth is, there's going to be a number of steps within that item, aren't there?
Yeah.
And through preparation, I can be a little bit more efficient if I know the steps that then go into building or pre-producing that show. And I think what he's already revealing for us here is, if you do that, if you're with a team, you can already get over those inefficiencies very, very early, sometimes even before you start, because you and all your team are already anticipating the things that you're going to have to do. And when you know where you're going, it does feel that little bit easier, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so I think it's the case he made, said differently, is like, look, take a checklist, because we do have the habit of just having a bit of a brain fog, right? And just forgetting something that we've always remembered, we just forget. So a checklist will back you up there. But I think importantly, what he's saying is that when a team has a great checklist, there's less uncertainty to worry about. There's less unknowns. And if something unexpected happens, because everything is in order, you can always go back to the checklist and find your way out. So I think I am totally on board. And I think that the exciting thing about what we've got ahead on this show is we're going to dig into the work of Atul Gawande. We're going to understand why we perhaps don't always reach for a checklist. We're going to hear some huge epic stories of how checklists have made a difference. But then we're going to break down the art of making a great checklist. And we're going to understand that this is far from something that is trivial, but something so simple and elegant can be the key to high performance. So, Mark, we have so